Now it's time for elevations. So how do we do elevations? Well, luckily Archicad auto generates elevations for us. So if you look at these elevations which are here by default, you can select any of them, and when you open them you should get the elevations. Or if you do not have them, well, there's a tool here in the viewport called elevations, and once you pick it you can draw the elevation line. So right now we have this one here, and let's open it up. So with it selected, we right click and say open view with current settings, and we will see the default elevations and what it actually looks like. And there we are. We have something like this, which is not definitely very bad, but we want to do a working elevation. So what that means is that we need to have only one pen color, which is going to be black and white. Two is that we need to get rid of all fields such that we have a black and white drawing, so we do not need fields. And then there's no need for seeing furniture through, so that's something we can get rid of it. And perhaps we could add a little bit of shadow to emphasize the forms. All right, so all those things we can do them in elevation settings. So let's right click and go to elevation settings and see a few things that we might do to improve this elevation. So under model display, model appearance settings, you can see that we have a few things going on here. And the first thing we have is cut elements, and right now we are not cutting anything, so it's an elevation, so that may not be helpful, so we can collapse it. So we see uncut elements. So uncut elements, we want to look at the elements, and you can see by default we have a color fill shaded, but we want it to be a uniform pen that has no fill and no shade. So if we put on uniform pen and make sure that the pen fill is actually a background, which is this TV here, this one, it will become white just as the background is white. Okay, so that's the uniform pen. So it is going to make everything black and white, and make every fill black, make every fill white, and then we have to deal with the pens. So the pens by default, we can also change them. So if we click here on uniform cut pen, you can decide what pen it should be, and I think like 0.13 could be good. It should be good for representation. And then if we did not want to see anything through those doors and windows, we might want to uncheck transparency such that now we will not be able to see anything there. So let's just say okay and see, and let Archicad generate that and see what we have. You can see that very quickly we have ourselves this flat elevation, which is an elevation drawing. And okay, great, but then we need to add a little bit of definition in these railings, because it looks like the posts are not showing, and that's because if we go to the settings of these railings, the posts are actually rounded, and that's what the issue is. So we could make them, boxy, keeping the dimensions the same, such that at least we have vertical, demarcations to show the different pens and where they stop. Okay, so I think that looks a little bit better. And then again, we want to be able to add some depth to this drawing, so that's why I was saying let's add some shadows and see what that looks like. So under settings, we can go under here and we have something called shadow, and by default we have here a common brick. Maybe we may want to have a percentage fill of, I don't know, 25% of whatever that is, and we see what that looks like, and that should create more definition, so you can see that looks way better. And sometimes in working drawings you can have the shadows and sometimes they may not be necessary, then you can choose what to do, but I like to have them because they sort of give depth in the elevation, and I like this better. And then as well, we need to go back to the ground floor such that we refine where this section is going to be. So currently it's here, and we might want to bring it a little closer such that once we are publishing this drawing, the elevations are seen, they are close enough. So this is the first one, and I would like to change how it looks like in terms of 2D representation. So in order to change that, I can go to the settings as well, and this time we are going to concentrate on something else rather than model appearance. So let's say, for example, marker. Let's go under marker text, marker symbol and text, and change it to circle 4, and let's also add some text to it. So for example, this is the front view. Perhaps I can call it F for front, and then here instead of it being south elevation, I can say that this should be front instead, front elevation. And reference ID, I can say this is the first elevation, E1, and that is what it would look like. And we can change the text as well, and that will be it. So this is what it's actually going to look like. Let's see, and I like that better, although I need it to be bigger because I think that it isn't big enough. Okay, so in the settings I can make this about 15, yeah, such that it gets a little bigger. So that means the text could use some size as well, which looks much better. So we have a front elevation right here. So let's go back and see what that looks like, because right now we have cut through the mesh. We should also see a line of mesh here, so which means that since we are cutting through this ground mesh, we might as well give it a black fill to give the elevation line, let it become the elevation line. So let's go elevation settings, and we do something called here in model appearance. We can say that we want to have the cut fill going to be shaded. Okay, so we can make everything shaded, and perhaps I could make everything black to have that elevation having that definition line across, which looks good, I think. And then as well, we can change these things, these floor plan representations, and we will do that by going back to the elevation settings, and we can change them to something else. Let's go here, story levels, and right now they are set to display only. So in case we wanted to publish this elevation, these things are not going to show because they are just on display only. So we want them to be display and output, such that they are outputs once we take the elevation, take the elevation out. All right, so then we also need a line. I think I'm gonna go with the one we have before, the dashed triple, such that all these lines are going to be broken up a little bit. And then we go down here in what it's going to look like. So the text, which are these ones here, are supposed to be a certain type, representation type, and that will be, so I can also add a marker there so you'll see what it would look like. So let's say okay, and you see what changes we have made, and I can see that looks a little bit better because we have some marker here, and then we have some changed font, and it's looking good. So let's move this closer such that we have these a little closed up a little bit, okay, from that side and this side as well. Okay, and this will be our very first elevation. And as well, I think we will not like to have these grid lines look like this, so we need to break them up a little bit so they are not also representing like this, so that let them show like the way they are on the ground floor. So for that, let's go grab all these grid lines, and in the settings we should see something here. So in the floor plan, this is what they look like, and let's make them look the same also in the sections as well. And remember, we have also those grid lines on the first floor, so you want to select all of them and do the same thing. And I need to copy them and put them on the terrace, which I did forget, so Ctrl C to copy, and have the same grid lines on the on here. Speaking of which, we will need to have the columns on these parts, especially these columns which are already here. So we will go in, and because these columns are not going to terminate here, they'll continue up, and these ones are not going to continue up, so only those will actually be able to make it. So Ctrl C to copy, and we bring them all the way up here. Okay, so this stuff is not going to affect the elevations necessarily, but it's part of improving our floor plan. Okay, so we have some of these columns, and then we have the grid lines across here. All right, let's see what that looks like in the front, and you should see that our grid lines have been changed, and that's what we have. And then as well, I think in terms of representation, these should move from down all the way and increase a little bit up there. And since there are 3 of them, I will have to do this 3 times for each grid element. All right, and then I think finally, in order to add a little bit of depth to this drawing further, is to have this at the front, but then this to be lighter, yeah, which is called fed distant elements. Let's fed this thing on the terrace, okay? And we can do that by going to the settings and elevation settings and enable fed distant elements, so which is in model display, of course. And then down here we have something called fed distance elements, and we say okay, and now we should see something interesting, right? So you can see these elements have been sent to the back, and perhaps we might need to edit that line in the floor plan such that the door which is below is not left out. Yeah, so where it is, we can see that the door on the ground floor has been left out, and we might want to take it further, this line, such that it's just after that door. Okay, but the rest of the things should be faded backward. All right, and in order to keep the consistency, I think I will put back the shadows in the faded elements. Okay, so I'm going to do that, but where is, yeah, let's keep the shadows as well, and hopefully that shadow is 25% as well. Yeah, and this time maybe over lighter color. Okay, yeah, just a little hint of the shadow. Yeah, much better. Right, so I think I like this elevation now, and it's pretty ready. So we have to do the same for different elevations as well. And the fastest way we could actually do that is by using pick up and inject parameters like we saw before. So we can pick up the parameters of this elevation and we inject parameter by clicking here and clicking there. So you can see it becomes the F again, but all we have to do is now rename it. And in the settings, I'm going to rename this as under marker text here, marker symbol and text. Let's name it as side elevation right, okay, SR. So I'm going to come here and name this as side elevation in brackets right, okay. And then as well, we need to put in the reference ID as E2 or elevation 2, okay, and that will be fine. And you can see the fed distant element is here. Perhaps we want it to be further, maybe somewhere. We will decide what that is in elevation later. And then as well, we want to do the same. So let me pick this and inject it here, Control Alt to click, and I will put this here, and this time this is going to be side elevation left. So in the settings, we want to go general and make this left and make this to be E3 or the third elevation. And then we come under symbol marker, we make this side elevation left, okay, side elevation left, okay, great. And then finally, where is the back? So we can pick this by alt clicking it and Control Alt inject it here, and this will be the rear. So in the settings, we will go and get something here called R for rear, and then we go up here, name this as rear elevation, all right, and then make sure that this is E4 or the fourth elevation. And of course the fed distant elements could be later after these first elements. And as well on this elevation, we might want to expand just before this element. So let's open up this left and see, open elevation in new tab, and we should see that the elevation has been created like this, okay. So I need to come in and reduce this span from this side and this other side. We can pick, since we are not cutting through the mesh, we could expand the mesh in floor plan, or we could just use a fill on top just to signify this region. So I'm going to pick a fill, and I'm going to make it a foreground color, which is going to be black, and I'll draw across this entire stuff. I think to avoid that, I might need to increase this and add to the polygon that area, and move this node to somewhere here. Need to make sure that I'm getting it right, okay? Something like so. All right, I like this. And then as well, for the sake of documentation, we could as well have some texture on this roof, which you can do simply by going to elevations and ticking something called cover fill. I believe it is cover fill under here, just below uncut line pen, so we have something called cover fill foreground. And as well, you can do that for this part, cover fill. You can also do that for the fade element part, such that, you know, all of them are textured, and you can already see that we have that kind of thing going on. And you could edit that part. So I think that in this scenario, I'm going to bring this back to somewhere there. Let me see if I like what it looks like. Then I think it'll do. Yeah, that will do. It will show. And that's why I have issues with this kind of thing, because right now we are cutting through this and we have this cover fill and that cover fill. Perhaps the best kind of thing would be to offset, to either remove the distant element altogether by enclosing everything, or we could create. All right, so we could include another thing by adding a node here. So right now we have that. I would like to move this and enclose this roofing here, but still exclude this element, because that's what I want to be faded. Let's see if that does the magic for us. All right, I think that's pretty convincing to have that roof, and then these elements have been faded, and yeah, that's looking great. And let's also look at what's happening on this other side. Open elevation in new tab. So we have ourselves the next view, and it's actually not bad. So we can put in this elevation line or ground level, whatever you want to call it. And I think looks quite cool. We have that in there. That's our next elevation, and for this elevation as well, we can enable cover fill like we did before for the previous elevation. So in here, making sure that under uncut here, we need to get to check surface cover fill ground, and we do the same for these areas which are faded as well. And that looks quite good. I think for this one, I'm going to encompass the entire thing, so we don't have any discrepancies. So for this one, yeah, I might as well just cover the entire thing. All right, next is but of course, if I wanted, I would have this lighter and this one darker, because this is much closer, which is actually not that bad. I will consider doing that, although I may need to clean up what's happening on the first floor. So you can go to the first floor and kind of inspect to see what's actually happening with this wall vis-a-vis this one, maybe because of these lines. So let's mirror this. I'm going to mirror that and bring it back to this place. Yeah, perhaps that could do the magic. Yeah, it looks much cleaner. It has been fixed. Okay, and then as well, I'll go ahead and clean up this thing for the sake of representation. And for our final elevation, we will go in here and see what the rear looks like. Okay, let's see. Where are you? Come on. We select that and see open in new tab. Okay. And this looks good, really. It looks quite good. And all I need here is the elevation line. Even that is more than enough. And we can chop off these elements here. Like so. And now we have ourselves 4 elevations. So as you can see, we have E1, E2, E3, and E4, which is pretty good. Good. So on to the next one, where we'll look at a section.